right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going deep into a case that's both baffling and heartbreaking. The disappearance of Cindy Vanderbeek. Now, imagine trading the hustle and bustle of New York City for the open water, for the boat show circuit. That's exactly what Cindy did, leaving a high-powered job to join her husband Steve on a life that some might call nomadic, maybe even a little gypsy-like. But this story takes a dark turn when Cindy vanishes, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a whole lot of suspicion.
Yeah, right from the start, there's this air of mystery. Cindy promises her family she'll be at her nephew's christening in Maryland. But when the day comes, only Steve shows up, alone. His story. Cindy got a sudden job offer in Wisconsin. Sounds a little too convenient, don't you think?
Yeah, it does. And it gets even stranger. Steve starts acting well. Shady is the word that comes to mind. He empties Cindy's safe deposit box, takes some money from her mom, and he seems oddly unconcerned about his wife's, her sudden disappearance. Cindy's family is understandably worried, but when they try to file a missing persons report, it's a nightmare. Bureaucracy at its finest.
Right. It's a huge problem, you see. This is where the transient lifestyle becomes a major obstacle. No fixed address, no clear jurisdiction. It's a frustrating situation that often hinders these kinds of missing person cases. You know what we need. We need a better system, maybe a national database specifically for cases like this.
I think that's a great idea. But speaking of obstacles, enter Detective Bob Nichols from Montgomery County, Maryland. Now, Cindy's case wasn't even on his radar, jurisdictionally speaking. But something about it compelled him to dig deeper. What stands out to you about Detective Nichols' early investigation?
Persistence, absolutely. He faced pressure from his superiors to focus on cases within his jurisdiction, but he kept pushing. Interviewed Cindy's family, piecing together the timeline, highlighting Steve's odd behavior. It's admirable, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I admire his dedication. But part of me wonders if that singular focus on Steve early on might have caused investigators to miss other possibilities. What was Steve's initial narrative? What was he telling people?
Well, he spun this tale of a rocky marriage, claimed Cindy was unhappy and ran off with another man, even suggested she might be sailing the Caribbean with a new love interest. Classic deflection tactic.
So was Steve a master manipulator? Or was there genuine trouble in paradise? After all, at this point, there's no evidence of foul play.
Exactly. It's a crucial point. The early stages are all about gathering information, separating fact from fiction. Detective Nichols was walking a tightrope.
He was, and then there's Steve himself. Practically a ghost. No fixed address, constantly on the move. How do you track someone like that?
It's a real challenge. No cell phone pings in those days, no social media to track. Detective Nichols tried pagers, phone calls, but Steve was elusive, almost as if he was actively avoiding contact.
Which, as they say, makes you look a little suspicious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then the case takes a bizarre turn with a christening gift. It arrives at Cindy's family's house, supposedly from Cindy. But something's not right about the signature on the card.
Yeah, a seemingly small detail, but incredibly significant. It's almost as if someone was trying to create this illusion, a sign that Cindy was alive and well. And wouldn't you know it, this strange gift arrives right as Detective Nichols gets a lead on Steve's whereabouts at a nudist colony in Davie, Florida.
A Seminole Health Club and Resort.
Yeah.
Talk about an unexpected setting for a criminal investigation. Imagine those detectives, used to the grit of police work, suddenly in a clothing-optional community.
Oh, let me tell you, Detective Nichols recounts this part with a bit of humor. The sheer awkwardness of showing up to question a suspect who's strolling around, in his birthday suit. It must have been a sight to see.
I can only imagine. But humor aside, they get Steve down to the Davie Police Department for questioning. Is he finally ready to come clean?
Not a chance. He sticks to his story. Insists Cindy left him for another man. Calm, collected. Almost too calm, some might say. So they decide to run a voice stress analysis test. You know, the one that supposedly detects lies through tiny changes in a person's voice.
Yeah, I've heard about those.
Yeah.
But isn't that a bit, unreliable? Can't people learn to manipulate those tests?
You're absolutely right. Experienced deceivers can sometimes beat the system. But in Steve's case, the results were interesting. He passed with flying colors. No signs of deception whatsoever.
So what does that tell us? Is he telling the truth, or is he just really good at playing the game?
Right, well, Detective Nichols clearly wasn't convinced. He needs more to go on. So he turns his attention to Steve's trailer, his belongings. And it turns out Steve's a bit of a pack rat, which actually works in the investigation's favor. It's like striking gold. Receipts, notes, documents, Years of their lives, piled up in that trailer, a treasure trove of potential clues. And amidst the chaos, Detective Nichols finds something particularly intriguing. A notebook, filled with what looks like Steve practicing Cindy's signature.
Okay, now things are getting really suspicious. First, the forged signature on the christening card, and now this. It's almost like he's rehearsing, trying to perfect his deception.
Exactly. And remember, this was the pre-digital age. No convenient cell phone records to trace their movements, but those receipts. They became a lifeline for the investigation.
Like a breadcrumb trail through time. So Detective Nichols sets about reconstructing their journey from Maine to Florida, meticulously plotting those receipts on a map. It must have been a monumental task.
And tedious, hours spent sifting through gas station receipts, hotel bills, restaurant checks. But it was crucial. Each receipt was a potential timestamp, a location marker. And as the map started to fill in, a major discrepancy emerged.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What was it?
Well, Steve swore he drove straight down I-95 south after leaving the boat show in Maine. But those receipts told a different story. They revealed a detour, a westward route towards Albany, New York.
Why would Steve lie about his route? What was he trying to hide?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it led Detective Nichols to a crucial piece of evidence. A hotel receipt from Hunter Mountain, New York, dated March 22nd. 2 occupants. But then a receipt from West Virginia, dated March 24th, shows only 1 occupant.
So what happened to Cindy in those 2 days? Where could she have gone? Stay with us because in part 2 of this deep dive, we'll explore how Detective Nichols handles this bombshell revelation and what it reveals about Steve Vanderbeek's possible involvement. So we left off with a pretty chilling discovery. Receipts show Cindy at a hotel in New York on March 22nd, but then gone from a West Virginia hotel receipt just 2 days later. This seeming an insignificant detail shifts the entire investigation. What happens next?
This discrepancy in the receipts, well, it completely changes the game. It's no longer just a missing person case. Now there's a specific time frame, a specific location, and a growing suspicion of foul play. Detective Nichols had to shift his focus from finding Cindy to potentially uncovering a crime.
We're talking about a vast mountainous region between New York and West Virginia. Finding evidence, let alone a missing person, in that kind of terrain sounds like searching for a needle in a haystack.
Daunting, absolutely. But you got to remember, Detective Nichols had meticulously mapped Steve's every move using those receipts. He knew the route, the gas stations they stopped at, the diners they frequented, so he could target his search along their likely path.
So instead of a massive sprawling search, he could focus on specific locations, hoping to find a clue, anything that might connect Cindy to those places. Did those targeted searches turn up any leads?
Sadly, no. Despite their best efforts, no trace of Cindy was found. It's a harsh reality of these cases, you know. Evidence can be incredibly difficult to find, especially in remote areas. It's possible her remains were, well, too well hidden, or moved far from Steve's route.
Such a frustrating situation. So much suspicion, but no concrete proof. But while those physical searches were going on, what was happening with the rest of the investigation?
Well, Detective Nichols wasn't putting all his eggs in one basket. Remember that notebook filled with Steve practicing Cindy's signature? He sent it to the FBI for handwriting analysis, hoping to get expert confirmation that Steve was indeed attempting to forge her handwriting.
Another piece of the puzzle falling into place. It seems more and more like Steve was trying to create a narrative, make it seem like Cindy was still alive, when in reality, she wasn't.
Exactly. And he sent that suspicious christening card with the forged signature to the FBI as well. He was building a case, brick by brick, using forensic science to dismantle Steve's carefully crafted facade.
But let's go back to the motive for a second. Why would Steve want to harm Cindy? What led investigators to believe this wasn't just a simple case of a wife leaving her husband?
Well, remember those conversations Cindy had with her friends back at the boat show in Maine? She confided in them that her marriage was falling apart, that she was planning to divorce Steve at the end of the season.
Ah, so a possible motive emerges. A husband facing rejection, perhaps feeling betrayed or angry by his wife's decision to leave.
And remember, Steve controlled their finances. Cindy's family mentioned he handled the money. They had a joint safe deposit box. There's a potential financial motive there as well.
So a double whammy. The emotional blow of a pending divorce and the potential financial repercussions. Did investigators uncover any evidence that Steve stood to gain financially from Cindy's disappearance?
That's precisely what Detective Nichols was trying to determine. He delved into their financial records, examining bank statements, credit card transactions, insurance policies, a financial paper trail spanning years.
Talk about a tedious task. especially in the pre-digital age, trying to trace the flow of money without the convenience of online banking records and digital trails.
Painstaking, absolutely, but essential. They were living a cash-heavy lifestyle, constantly on the move, which made tracking their finances even more challenging. But amidst this complexity, Detective Nichols started to notice a pattern of suspicious financial activity.
What kind of suspicious activity?
He found evidence that Steve had been withdrawing large sums of cash from their joint accounts in the weeks leading up to Cindy's disappearance. Why would he need so much cash, especially if, as he claimed, Cindy had left him and he was now on his own?
Right, it certainly raises red flags. What was Steve's explanation for these unusual withdrawals?
Oh, he claimed the money was for business expenses, for buying inventory for their vending booths at the boat shows.
But wouldn't Steve, as a seasoned boat show vendor, have legitimate reasons for carrying large sums of cash?
That's what makes this so tricky. It's easy to create plausible explanations for seemingly suspicious behavior. However, there's a catch. Those receipts, the ones detailing Steve's detour, well, they showed him traveling far from any of his usual suppliers.
So those receipts, meant to corroborate his story, actually contradict his explanation for the cash withdrawals. It seems more and more like those withdrawals were for something else entirely, something he was desperate to keep hidden.
It's a classic case of deception unraveling. Each lie, each inconsistency, chipped away at Steve's carefully crafted narrative. The pieces were starting to fall into place, painting a very different picture than the one Steve was presenting.
We've got a suspicious husband with a motive, opportunity, and a history of lying and deception. But without Cindy, how do you prove any of this in court? How do you convince a jury that Steve is responsible for her disappearance?
That's the challenge, isn't it? Circumstantial evidence can be compelling, but without a body, it's a much harder case to prosecute. Prosecutors needed more, something definitive that linked Steve to Cindy's disappearance.
So what happens next? Did the investigation stall? Did Steve walk away scot-free?
Not quite. While the lack of a body presented a major obstacle, Detective Nichols refused to give up. He kept Cindy's case open, reviewed the evidence regularly, and followed up on every new lead, no matter how insignificant it seemed. It's that dedication, that refusal to let the case fade into oblivion, that ultimately led to a major break.
We're about to dive into that turning point. But first, we need to take a quick break. We'll be right back with the final part of this deep dive into the disappearance of Cindy Vanderbeek. So we're back, and last we left off, Detective Nichols refused to let Cindy's case go cold. Years pass, but he never gives up. What was it that finally brought new life to this seemingly stalled investigation?
Well, time can be a double-edged sword in these cases. It can bury evidence, make witnesses harder to find, but it can also bring new tools, new technologies to light. And in this instance, it was the advancements in DNA technology that provided the break Detective Nichols had been waiting for.
DNA technology. How did that play into a case that was already years old?
You have to remember, Steve was a bit of a hoarder. Detective Nichols had the foresight to keep all the evidence from the case. We're not just talking about the receipts and documents, but even things like, the contents of Steve's vacuum cleaner bag.
Wait, the vacuum cleaner bag. That seems like an awfully long shot. What could they possibly find in something like that?
It sounds crazy, right? But you never know where a crucial piece of evidence might be hiding. Forensic analysts took that vacuum cleaner bag, analyzed the dust, the debris, and they were able to extract a tiny sample of human blood. And guess what? It matched Cindy's DNA.
Wow, that's incredible. After all these years, a microscopic speck of blood in a vacuum cleaner bag connects Cindy to Steve's trailer. That's a game changer.
It really was. It was a testament to Detective Nichols' meticulousness, his understanding that even the seemingly insignificant can hold the key to solving a case. It also speaks volumes about the power of forensic science, its ability to unlock secrets hidden for years.
Absolutely. So with his newfound DNA evidence, did Steve finally face justice for Cindy's disappearance?
Well, the DNA was a major blow to Steve's defense. It directly contradicted his claim that Cindy had willingly left him and was never in his trailer. However, there were still challenges for the prosecution.
How so? Cindy's blood is in his trailer. We know Steve had a motive and the opportunity. What more could they possibly need?
Well, unfortunately, the DNA, while incredibly powerful, didn't answer the critical question of how Cindy died. Remember, her body was never found. Prosecutors couldn't definitively prove that Steve had murdered her.
So even with Cindy's blood in the trailer, he could still claim she was injured there, maybe accidentally.
Yeah.
And he panicked, disposed of her body somewhere else.
Exactly. Without a body, without a cause of death. The prosecution's case was largely circumstantial. They could point to Steve's lies, his suspicious behavior, the forged signatures, the DNA, but they couldn't definitively say how Cindy died or that Steve was directly responsible.
It's mind-boggling how much complexity there is to building a solid legal case. So where did things go from there? Did they ever find Cindy's remains? Did Steve ever stand trial?
Well, while the discovery of Cindy's blood didn't lead to the recovery of her body, it did reinvigorate the investigation. Prosecutors, armed with this new evidence and facing mounting pressure from Cindy's family and the public, decided to move forward with a case against Steve Vanderbeek.
Wow, a murder trial without a body. That's incredibly rare. What was the outcome? Was Steve finally held accountable for Cindy's disappearance?
In 2011, 16 years after Cindy vanished, Steve Vanderbeek was tried for her murder. The prosecution laid out their case, weaving together the circumstantial evidence, Steve's lies, his suspicious actions, those forged signatures, and of course the DNA evidence linking Cindy's blood to his trailer. They presented a pretty compelling argument.
It sounds like they threw everything they had at him. What did the jury decide?
Well, the jury deliberated for several days before delivering their verdict. They found Steve Vanderbeek guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison.
16 long years. But finally, a measure of justice for Cindy and her family. It speaks to Detective Nichols' determination and the incredible advancements in forensic science that helped bring this case to a close.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the power of persistence, of never giving up hope, even when the odds seem insurmountable.
But there's still a piece missing from this puzzle, a haunting question that remains unanswered. Where is Cindy? Did Steve ever reveal what happened to her? Where her body might be?
Sadly, no. Despite his conviction, Steve has never disclosed what happened to Cindy, or where her body might be located. He maintains his innocence, denying any knowledge of her whereabouts.
It's a heartbreaking reality. Cindy's family has justice, but not closure. They still can't lay their loved one to rest.
It's a reminder that even with a conviction, some mysteries may never be fully resolved. But we can find solace in the tireless efforts of those like Detective Nichols, who fight for truth, for justice, and in the hope that one day, Cindy's remains will be found, allowing her family to finally say goodbye.
Cindy's case really highlights the complexities of these investigations, the importance of dedicated investigators like Detective Bob Nichols, and the evolving power of forensic science. It's a story of heartbreak, but also a testament to the pursuit of justice, no matter how long it takes. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the disappearance of Cindy Vanderbeek, a case that reminds us that even amidst uncertainty, hope and the pursuit of truth can prevail. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.